The moment I saw 30,000 gallons of creek water tear through my HOA president's basement ceiling, I knew karma had just delivered her most devastating invoice yet. There I was, ankle-deep in Delilah Thornberry's waterlogged man cave, watching her husband's $80,000 home theater system get swallowed by a roaring tide of mountain runoff while she screamed about insurance policies and federal lawsuits. The sharp tang of justice hung in the air, blending perfectly with the mildew of soaked drywall as a furious cascade of water pounded through her once luxurious ceiling like nature itself had declared war. My boots squished against her Italian leather couch, now reduced to a sponge. Just 6 months earlier, this power-mad HOA tyrant had tried to cement over my family's historic creek without realizing she'd picked a fight with a hydraulic engineer who knew exactly how water carves through even the priciest basement waterproofing. So let me ask you, what would you do if your HOA president tried to erase your family legacy with a few truckloads of concrete? Drop a comment letting me know where you're tuning in from, and hit subscribe to hear more wild stories of HOA karma that'll absolutely make your week. I'm Marcus Hartwell. And half a year ago, I thought inheriting my grandfather's 3-acre slice of Colorado heaven might finally mend the pieces left by a painful divorce. The clear, cold creek winding through the backyard had been my refuge as a child during summers. With Grandpa Joe, he taught me to catch trout with bare hands and recognize birds just by their calls. For over 80 years, that creek had been fed by dependable mountain snowmelt even during droughts, creating a vibrant ecosystem where my kids, Emma and Jake, now spent weekends building rock dams, chasing salamanders, and reconnecting with their old man between custody visits. But it wasn't just scenic, it was legally untouchable. Grandpa's 1952 water rights made our claim older and stronger than any development that came after. And with my 15 years working on water systems for Morrison Environmental, I knew water law like the back of my hand. First in use, first in right, which means no newcomer can legally cut off an older water claim. That creek wasn't just our soul, it was why our land stayed valuable, our wildlife healthy, and our home cool in the summer while neighbors drained their savings. Then came Delilah Thornberry like a storm in stilettos. Picture someone who moved in from Phoenix with enough flashy cash to buy Millfield Springs' biggest McMansion and enough entitlement to think that made her queen. Her husband Vernon, he owns 3 car dealerships and sports WINR1 vanity plates on his white Escalade, parked proudly like a monument to overcompensation. Within half a year, Delilah had schemed her way into the HOA presidency and launched a scorched earth campaign dressed up as community enhancement. She had an almost supernatural radar for targeting anyone who didn't fit her rigid vision and ran them down with fees, violations, and non-stop pestering until they either bent to her will or left in frustration. Her overpriced perfume couldn't mask the stink of tyranny that now hung over our peaceful neighborhood. My own war with her officially ignited with a certified letter that spiked my blood pressure just opening it. Delilah demanded that I eliminate the water hazard within 30 days or face $500 daily fines. She claimed our creek was a mosquito haven and threatened nearby property. The irony, she was preaching water safety to a hydraulic engineer. When I went to her doorstep with Grandpa Joe's legal documentation and offered solutions, fencing, mosquito treatments, or even landscaping, she didn't so much as glance at the paperwork. There will be no exceptions, she sniffed, standing in my driveway, her $1,000 heels crunching over gravel like she was stomping out my family's legacy. I'd already seen what she'd done to others. Sweet Mrs. Morgan, a Vietnamese grandmother who grew pristine vegetables for half the block, was forced to rip up her garden because the plants weren't native, even though they were the same tomatoes sold at every local store. Then there was Dale, a young dad caring for 2 toddlers and a wife undergoing chemo, bullied into repainting his entire house regulation beige because Delilah found the color too bold for her aesthetic. Patricia, a retired teacher who gave 40 years to public schools, was slapped with violations for Christmas decorations in January even though she'd already taken them down. But Delilah thrived on humiliation. 3 families had already caved, shelling out thousands to appease her wrath. But I wasn't just another suburban pushover, I was a water systems expert. And I knew something she didn't. Water doesn't vanish when blocked, it reroutes, it builds pressure. And when it breaks free, it breaks everything in its path. She had no idea who she was dealing with. 2 weeks after our initial standoff, Delilah held an emergency HOA board meeting scheduled mid-morning on a weekday, timed perfectly so working folks couldn't show. Classic tactic from the HOA tyrant playbook. The meeting was pure pageantry. Her 3 hand-picked lackeys nodded like bobbleheads as she presented a dramatic slideshow accusing my creek of wrecking property values and endangering public health. It passed 4-1, with only Patricia standing firm against the circus. Within 3 days, I received a cease and desist letter from lawyers charging more per hour than some folks make in a month. They claimed my creek broke city ordinances regarding uncontrolled water flow. Here's something most homeowners don't realize: HOAs love to throw around legal language hoping you'll be distressed or confused to call their bluff. People get bounced around from city department to department until they assume the threat must be real. But Delilah's fatal miscalculation was underestimating how much people hate a bully. When I organized a community meeting at Grind and Barrett Coffee, 23 neighbors showed up. The stories they shared made my blood boil hotter than the espresso. Mrs. Morgan trembled as she recounted tearing up tomato seeds passed down from her grandmother in Vietnam. Dale nearly cried talking about being forced to repaint his house, while his wife lay sick in bed. It was obvious. Friends of Delilah got polite warnings. Enemies, they got hammered with fines. My professional instincts kicked in. I dug into the original HOA formation records from 1998 and there it was in black and white. My creek was explicitly excluded from the covenants because it predated the entire development. Even better, the city planning department confirmed that it had protected environmental status. Grandpa Joe's senior water rights legally trumped any HOA interference. Armed with bulletproof documentation and a fired-up community, I filed formal complaints with the State Water Rights Commission. Meanwhile, neighborhood kids started a Save Salamander Creek petition and pulled in over 200 signatures from across 3 school districts. Even my ex-wife Sarah offered to help with legal research, which should have been a clear sign that Delilah was quickly becoming public enemy number 1. But instead of backing off, Delilah went nuclear. She blocked my driveway with her Escalade, contacted my job trying to smear me, and began a creepy surveillance routine disguised as HOA compliance checks. She'd officially lost the plot and the gloves were off. She even called my employer, alleging I was stirring up workplace issues and urging them to reconsider whether I should be trusted with client projects. When that didn't work, she filed a bogus complaint with the county health department, claiming my stagnant creek bred dangerous mosquitoes. The cruel irony: her own backyard pond, complete with actual still water, was never inspected, while my crystal-clear mountain stream faced scrutiny. But her biggest tactical mistake? Dragging Tom Alvarez, the county health inspector, into the mess. Expecting a swamp, Tom arrived to find kids splashing in pristine, shallow water, trout darting through sunlit pools, and not a single mosquito in sight. Even better, Tom was a fly fisherman. He instantly recognized the rare, state-protected cutthroat trout in my creek, making any attempt to alter the waterway a potential environmental felony. Filing false environmental complaints creates an official paper trail, and government agencies hate being weaponized for personal vendettas. Tom's report not only cleared my name, it recommended the creek for county watershed protection status and labeled the complaint frivolous. That sparked a professional domino effect. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, a water quality specialist I'd worked with before, ran advanced tests showing my creek water was cleaner than most tap sources: 0 bacteria, perfect pH, and mineral levels that confirmed it had remained untouched for generations. News of Delilah's overreach spread fast. Industry colleagues began sharing my story at conferences as a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Delilah hired Frank Brennan, a private investigator, to dig up dirt on me. Instead, he found I mentored school STEM programs, had a flawless professional record, and that my grandfather who built the stone bridge over the creek was a World War II vet. Frank, a former cop, was so appalled when Delilah asked him to fabricate flaws and interpret facts against me. He provided a written statement confirming her attempt to bribe him into falsifying evidence. Now she wasn't just a petty tyrant, she was crossing into criminal territory. But her most damning error: trying to recruit new neighbors to join her vendetta, offering them reduced HOA fees in exchange for support. That backfired spectacularly when she pitched her plan to Dr. Patricia Kendall, an environmental scientist who'd just moved in. Not only did Patricia decline, she volunteered as an expert witness and threatened to Delilah for attempted environmental violations. Delilah's empire was crumbling. But she still had one Hail Mary: With less than a day's notice violating HOA bylaws, she called an emergency board meeting to approve a $10,000 special assessment on my property to cover the HOA's legal fees. She even threatened foreclosure if I didn't comply. But the real shock came Friday evening while I was away in Denver. A concrete truck pulled into my driveway. Delilah had authorized an illegal attempt to bury my grandfather's creek in cement without permits, studies, or legal grounds. It was environmental sabotage, plain and simple. My neighbors, thankfully, had my back. 12 frantic texts hit my phone before the crew even unloaded. I hit the highway at 80 miles per hour, wide-knuckled and furious, calling the sheriff, my lawyer, and the county inspector en route. When I pulled in and saw Delilah standing next to that mixer, smiling like a mad queen, I knew this war was finally coming to an end. Miguel, the seasoned foreman who'd spent 2 decades working with concrete, barely glanced at my water rights paperwork and the deputy's badge before bluntly stating he wouldn't lift a finger without the proper permits. The sharp scent of his cigarette blended with Delilah's anxious sweat as she realized her ambush was falling apart faster than a batch of bad cement. But the real bombshell dropped when Rebecca's audit exposed consistent embezzlement disguised as standard HOA expenditures. Delilah had greenlit a $15,000 landscaping deal paid to Vernon's car dealership for phantom work on land that didn't even exist. She had siphoned off the community pool maintenance fund to bankroll her personal legal battle, leaving real repair needs neglected while she waged war against my creek. The most incriminating part, she'd quietly approved a covenant violation for her own illegal deck addition while ruthlessly targeting neighbors for the same infractions. She'd been treating the HOA like her own ATM, acting as judge, jury, and executioner over other people's property rights. My years of designing public water systems taught me one thing: government agencies despise being dragged into personal grudges. And when bureaucrats figure out they've been used, they suddenly get very interested in setting the record straight. As agencies began cross-referencing Delilah's bogus complaints, a clear pattern emerged. She went from accuser to possible defendant in a series of fraud investigations. The media firestorm ignited when Channel 9 News reached out for an interview after my Facebook post about the halted concrete delivery racked up 50,000 views in just 6 hours. Sitting under harsh studio lights, woozy from the heavy smell of hairspray, I explained how one individual's abusive HOA power could erode entire communities unless people stood up, armed with facts and records. The story spread like wildfire across regional outlets, drawing hundreds of responses from homeowners sharing their own horror stories about authoritarian HOA leaders who forgot they were supposed to serve, not rule. In response, Delilah posted a choreographed Facebook video shot in her immaculate living room. It racked up negative reactions faster than a politician's scandal. She painted herself as the target of a coordinated harassment campaign by radical environmentalists endangering property values and neighborhood norms. But the comments section erupted as neighbors shared screenshots of her bullying, pictures of the trespassing concrete truck, and documents exposing her financial misconduct, turning her image from victim to would-be tyrant, watching her rule collapse in real time. Victory hung in the air like crisp mountain wine before a cleansing storm, one that promised to strip away the falsehoods and leave only truth behind. Then came the envelope left anonymously on my doorstep one Tuesday morning, like divine retribution wrapped in fine stationery. The thick, luxurious paper felt almost sacred as I carried it inside with my coffee. When I opened it, photographs spilled onto my kitchen table like stills from a crime documentary. What I saw made my engineering mind ignite. Detailed images showed Delilah's basement renovation, extensive, unpermitted concrete work, illegal drainage setups, and a complex French drain system with no inspection, no approval, nothing. The technical implications struck like a bolt of lightning. Her $45,000 man cave build hadn't just broken building codes, it had redirected the natural flow of groundwater that had sustained my family's creek for generations. Her waterproofing system, complete with sump pumps and underground barriers, was engineered to keep Vernon's entertainment room dry at the cost of the surrounding environment. But physics doesn't honor property lines or vanity projects. That diverted water had to go somewhere. By blocking the underground flow that fed our creek through droughts since 1952, she had reduced the water by 30% and caused the very standing water and drainage issues she blamed on me. The irony was almost poetic. Every complaint she hurled: stagnant water, mosquito breeding, Risk to property was a direct result of her own illegal actions. The anonymous packet even included contractor invoices from Brantley Concrete Solutions, dated during the city's permit review window, proving construction started without approval and never saw inspection. Even worse, the billing for environmental waste disposal clashed with photographic evidence showing truck runoff entering storm drains marked with EPA warnings. When I aligned the construction timeline with Grandpa Joe's detailed weather journals, the evidence was undeniable. For 70 years, he had tracked water levels like a man who knew that water was life. Our creek had remained steady through storms and droughts like clockwork until 6 weeks after Delilah's basement project began. Her changes acted like an underground dam, starving the creek and flooding nearby homes when it rained. Rebecca Santos practically radiated fierce satisfaction when I laid the evidence across her table. "Marcus, this isn't just code violation," she said. "This is environmental crime with federal consequences. The Clean Water Act classifies dumping construction waste into storm systems as a felony with penalties reaching $50,000 per day. And her unauthorized alterations now required environmental studies more expensive than most mortgages, just to even consider retroactive approval. The legal fallout was staggering. Potential EPA action, mandatory cleanup, personal liability for damaged properties, and criminal charges for contaminating municipal systems. Most homeowners don't realize that major drainage alterations often demand costly environmental permits because of the widespread impact. Delilah skipped every step, creating liabilities that would haunt her and voided her insurance coverage when things went wrong. But the most satisfying twist was how this flipped our legal footing entirely. Delilah had spent months claiming my creek posed a threat, yet it was her own unlawful construction behind every issue. That luxurious basement had become a ticking financial time bomb, uninsurable due to the violations, and remediation would mean ripping up Vernon's prized man cave to install proper drainage. The woman who tried to destroy my family's legacy with lies had accidentally handed us a treasure trove of evidence against herself. Every agency she had once used as a weapon now had the authority and motivation to prosecute her. It felt like watching gravity finally catch up to someone who'd been falling for months, unaware the crash was inevitable. The War Council that would dismantle Delilah's empire assembled at Flapjack Junction on a brisk Thursday morning, where the smell of bacon sizzling mingled with the electrifying scent of justice. Rebecca took command of our corner booth like a general rallying her forces, spreading legal documents over the sticky tabletop. Dr. Amanda Rodriguez meticulously laid out the environmental data, her movements precise as surgery. Patricia's phone buzzed nonstop with updates from neighbors once victims, now a resistance army hungry for justice. The clinking of coffee mugs and rustling of papers created a rhythm of preparation that made my engineer's heart thrum with purpose. "Marcus, this isn't just a counterattack," Rebecca said, her eyes burning with conviction. "This is a full-on offensive." She outlined a legal pincer movement, a lawsuit for harassment and emotional distress, environmental crime reports to state authorities, and an audit that would uncover every misappropriated dollar. The beautiful irony, every government office Delilah once tried to use against me now had clear grounds to go after her for actual crimes. Dr. Rodriguez had transformed our creek into an environmental attorney's dream case, documenting rare species and ecological systems Delilah's concrete schemes had endangered. The creek didn't just host native Colorado cutthroat trout, it filtered runoff from upstream farms, shielding public water supplies from nitrogen contamination. Delilah's alterations had jeopardized the watershed across the entire valley. The environmental impact study alone would cost $50,000 and take 2 years, assuming permits weren't outright denied for harming protected habitats. Patricia had turned her for decades of teaching experience into a grassroots movement that ran like clockwork. Phone trees, social media coordination, rapid response teams. Our neighborhood was no longer afraid. It was a political machine laser-focused on ending Delilah's reign for good. We'd gathered proof of harassment targeting 14 families, nearly $90,000 in financial fraud, and procedural violations that nullified 2 years of board decisions. Most importantly, we had witnesses ready to testify about the emotional and financial toll her tyranny had inflicted. The media frenzy had erupted beyond local news into a full-blown viral wave symbolizing a stand against institutional abuse. Channel 9's investigative series on HOA corruption featured Art Creek as a shining example and environmental David battling a suburban Goliath. Footage of children catching salamanders was contrasted with images of Delilah's illegal concrete truck invasion. Environmental organizations from across the country picked up our story, turning a neighborhood dispute into a nationwide case study in how ordinary citizens can bring down corrupt power with facts and perseverance. The sweet taste of justice was stronger than Patricia's famous cinnamon rolls cooling on the diner counter. From my years designing public water systems, I'd learned this much: bullies who abuse legal processes rarely break just one law. They usually break several, counting on fear and fatigue to keep their victims from connecting the dots. In Colorado, strong anti-SLAPP statutes shield residents from lawsuits meant to suppress legitimate concerns about public matters. These laws include provisions for recovering legal fees, making baseless lawsuits financially ruinous for those who lose. The financial audit had exposed misconduct so egregious, even a mob accountant would have blushed. Aside from paying Vernon's car lot $15,000 for fake landscaping, Delilah had signed off on her own HOA violations, used community money to cover her personal legal bills, and hid glaring conflicts of interest that trampled every basic duty of fiduciary responsibility. 3 board members were already quietly seeking legal counsel to assess their own risk of being sued, while several homeowners were demanding reimbursement for dues spent on unauthorized legal battles. What had started as my effort to collect documentation had grown into a full-scale multimedia archive covering for generations of creek preservation. It included time-lapse footage of local wildlife across the seasons, professional reports affirming our water rights, and vintage photographs from Grandpa Joe that illustrated 80 years of unbroken creek flow and community value. The visuals alone would devastate any jury, showcasing serene nature and protected ecosystems alongside footage of cement trucks destroying habitat and surveillance videos of environmental vandalism. But perhaps the most gratifying development was watching Delilah mentally unravel under increasing scrutiny. As we quietly built an uncheckable legal case with expert documentation, she spiraled deeper into erratic and often criminal acts that provided us with a steady stream of new evidence exposing her complete lack of leadership fitness. Her credibility was disintegrating faster than any opposition research could have managed. The upcoming public showdown would offer our neighborhood front row seats to witness the spectacular collapse of a power-hungry bully who forgot that authority without accountability is just expensive harassment wrapped in formal letterhead. Her descent into legal and moral chaos hit a new low the night she trespassed on my property, an act that turned my stomach when I reviewed the surveillance footage the following morning. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when she and an associate tiptoed into my backyard like amateur burglars, armed with high-end cameras and soil sampling tools, hinting at something more ominous than just another meritless lawsuit. In the grainy footage, her designer boots sank into the muddy banks as she snapped photos from every angle, filled mason jars with dirt, and scribbled notes into a journal like a deranged scientist. Watching her violate our family's sanctuary under cover of darkness filled me with a furious sense of betrayal. Somehow she imagined this late-night trespass would justify her ongoing assault on my grandfather's legacy. When I reported the break-in, Deputy Martinez caught them on the scene. His flashlight caught Delilah's face, mascara streaked and stunned like a raccoon caught rummaging through garbage. Her hired expert, an environmental consultant brought in to fabricate hazard claims, bolted into the woods at the first sign of law enforcement, leaving Delilah to explain why she was performing unapproved soil testing at midnight with equipment better suited for forensic labs than backyards. Watching her grip those jars with shaking hands as Deputy Martinez documented the illegal trespass was nearly pathetic, until I remembered how hard she'd worked to destroy everything my family built using lies and legal bullying. But her biggest mistake came later, when desperation pushed her to try bribing Jake Morrison, the owner of Mountain Structural Solutions, into giving false testimony about foundation safety. Jake, a third-generation builder known for his ethical standards, secretly recorded their entire conversation. In it, Delilah offered him $5,000 in cash for a report falsely claiming that creek erosion posed a structural threat to nearby homes. The smell of panic sweat mingled with luxury perfume as she detailed her plan to fake a structural emergency that would force immediate creek alteration, skipping any environmental oversight. All you need to do is interpret normal soil as unstable, she told Jake, her voice strained with panic. Highlight the urgency. Make it sound like a looming collapse. I'll handle the legal stuff once we have a professional justification for emergency work. When Jake turned her down and threatened to report the bribery, Delilah's mask cracked. She flew into a rant about eco-extremists and plummeting property values before storming off like a toddler denied candy by responsible adults. Jake's integrity outmatched Delilah's corruption. His written statement outlining her attempt to commit perjury gave Rebecca the legal ammunition to pursue criminal conspiracy charges that would shadow Delilah long after our civil case ended. The recording captured it all: her instructions to fabricate data, justify phony emergencies, and sidestep legal protections with manipulated evidence. From my experience working with public contractors, I knew trying to bribe a licensed professional is no small matter. It undermines the very systems designed to ensure structural and environmental safety. Meanwhile, the community's surveillance network had evolved from neighborly chatter into a comprehensive log of Delilah's increasingly unstable behavior. Mrs. Morgan caught her snapping pictures of homes without permission, expanding her harassment to anyone who supported creek preservation. Dale recorded her threatening elderly residents with property assessments and legal action if they didn't sign anti-creek petitions. Patricia meticulously documented HOA rule violations as Delilah abandoned democratic process in favor of issuing commands like a suburban tyrant. But the nail in her legal coffin came when Delilah called emergency city services claiming that my creek had caused severe basement flooding that required immediate action. Engineers dispatched to investigate found that the flooding stemmed entirely from her own unauthorized drainage alterations completely unrelated to the natural creek, which had flowed unchanged for nearly a century. The official report not only disproved her claim, it exposed a pattern of filing false emergency reports to misuse public resources and trigger unlawful government responses. By then, pressure from the building department had reached boiling point. Formal citations gave her 30 days to apply for retroactive permits or face daily fines stacking faster than credit card debt. The mandated environmental impact review carried a $40,000 price tag and an 18-month process, during which the flooding would worsen with every seasonal storm. Insurance companies refused to pay for damage from unpermitted work, leaving Delilah financially exposed. As her ability to manipulate the situation unraveled, she launched one final act of madness. Friday evening, as I prepared to leave for a work trip to Denver, the sound of concrete mixers near the creek announced her boldest crime yet, an attempt to permanently bury my family's creek in cement. She intended to do it while I was away, likely hoping the environmental devastation would be too late to reverse by the time I returned. Her crew, mostly employees from Vernon's dealership, had been recruited to help under the absurd label of a community improvement project. Apparently, Delilah believed calling a felony conspiracy volunteer work could excuse the destruction of 80 years of preserved nature. The scene felt like a wildlife sanctuary being invaded by eco-terrorists disguised as HOA helpers. Neighbors texted nonstop updates, photos of equipment, footage of workers. Delilah showed up in a designer business suit, clearly under the impression that luxury fashion would lend legitimacy to federal crimes committed in front of witnesses. Miguel, the seasoned foreman of the concrete crew, reviewed my water rights documentation and backed off immediately. "Mom, this is protected land with senior water rights going back to 1952, he said. "You want federal charges, then get federal permits. I'm not risking my license over your HOA soap opera." Help arrived like a scene from a Western. Deputy Martinez delivering cease and desist orders, Dr. Kendall warning of Clean Water Act violations with $25,000 daily penalties, and Inspector Thompson confirming that the planned creek alterations lacked every required approval. Within minutes, the concrete crew scattered like carnival workers running from a tornado, demanding payment for the canceled job. Delilah's face shifted through shades of shock and fury like a live-action mood ring. But the final blow came when Vernon himself showed up and publicly condemned her actions. In front of 30 neighbors, reporters, and police officers, he revealed that Delilah had hidden $60,000 in legal fees and HOA penalties, endangering their family's financial security. "My wife has completely lost sight of what matters," he said, voice trembling. "This creek has been part of our neighborhood for generations. Wrecking it won't fix the mess she made with illegal construction." Watching her own husband turn on her triggered a meltdown even worse than her prior episodes. Delilah's public breakdown turned our cul-de-sac into a courtroom. She screamed about government plots and threatened to sue God himself. She accused everyone from the sheriff to the EPA of being part of my so-called environmental cult. Phones and news cameras captured her dramatic unraveling as she morphed from authoritarian HOA queen to textbook psychological case. Her expensive outfit wilted in the Colorado heat as she shrieked about rights she'd violated and laws she'd broken for months. Then something incredible happened. The neighborhood cheered. Kids waved Save Our Creek signs made in art class. Parents live-streamed the chaos. And justice real, community-backed justice went viral. Environmental activists circulated videos showing ordinary residents standing up to systemic corruption using nothing but documentation and relentless persistence, transforming our creek into a rallying symbol for grassroots environmental justice. The movement sparked similar uprisings in HOA-ruled suburbs across Colorado. Construction projects near natural waterways are legally bound to conduct environmental impact assessments costing tens of thousands precisely because altering a stream's path can wreak ecological and property damage that lasts for generations. Delilah's bid to bypass this requirement would have triggered enforcement from multiple regulatory bodies, leading to criminal exposure that no insurance policy could shield against, and long-lasting legal consequences tied to property ownership. As her expenses spiraled between canceled concrete contracts, snowballing violation penalties, and crushing legal bills, Delilah found herself trapped in a financial tailspin. Her basement began flooding worse with each storm, proving that her unauthorized drainage alterations were directly responsible for the very water issues she'd wrongly blamed on the creek's natural path. Vernon's decision to break publicly from her crusade marked the beginning of their marriage's unraveling, driven by her alarming obsession with demolishing our neighborhood's most treasured natural feature, an obsession no one could rationalize, the emergency HOA meeting that would ultimately dismantle Delilah's power base. Saw the Millfield Springs Community Center filled beyond fire safety limits, 160 residents squeezed into a room designed for just 50. The charged air was a mix of anxious anticipation and the sweet scent of long overdue justice, as neighbors once silenced by fear came together to reclaim their voice. Channel 9 News aired the meeting live, while 3 local reporters documented proceedings that would test if ordinary people could reclaim self-governance from suburban despots drunk on unchecked authority. County Commissioner Janet Rodriguez observed the meeting officially thanks to the statewide media spotlight our creek had drawn, while Deputy Sheriff Martinez stood by, poised to intervene if tensions exploded. The low hum of whispered discussions and camera clicks added to the palpable energy of a crowd ready to finally stand tall through lawful, democratic means. Delilah's entrance 20 minutes late was pure performance. Dressed in formal business attire meant to assert dominance she no longer held, she looked more like a fallen monarch attending her own trial. She immediately called for an executive session to shut out the press and public, but the request collapsed. Without support, even her former allies on the board had jumped ship. Watching her stand alone at the podium, surrounded by the very people she'd bullied into submission, might have inspired pity if not for the families she'd financially ruined and emotionally tormented. The moment things truly unraveled was when Treasurer Patricia took the floor. She announced that Delilah had funneled $87,000 of HOA funds into her personal vendetta against my creek, leaving the association bankrupt and enriching attorneys who'd enabled her descent into criminal behavior. This board was never authorized to turn legal weapons against its own residents, Patricia declared, her voice bolstered by 4 decades of civics education. Mrs. Thornberry has disguised embezzlement as public service, and now every family here is being forced to cover the damage. The weight of that truth was unmistakable. I presented my case like a closing argument in a courtroom, with visuals that included a detailed harassment timeline, my grandfather's 1952 water rights, legal violations, and environmental evidence. The presentation made her guilt impossible to ignore. The stark contrast between thriving natural habitat and aggressive construction tactics left many residents gasping, especially when security footage revealed shocking environmental abuse. Testimonies turned the meeting into a public reckoning. Mrs. Morgan, her voice shaking, shared how Delilah's threats led her to destroy her grandmother's heirloom garden. Dale fought back tears, recalling how he was forced to repaint his home while his wife was undergoing chemotherapy. 15 residents spoke of financial coercion, targeted harassment, and psychological manipulation, painting a full picture of a regime that weaponized authority under the guise of community improvement. Attacking my creek, we realized, was just the tip of a much larger, festering iceberg. But the moment that sealed Delilah's fate arrived when Rebecca Santos stepped up, holding an envelope. The room fell into dead silence as she opened it and read aloud. The Colorado Attorney General had officially filed charges against Delilah Thornberry for environmental violations, insurance fraud, HOA fund embezzlement, and conspiracy to commit perjury. The words hit the crowd like a lightning strike, followed by explosive cheers that shook the very walls. Rebecca kept reading. Federal EPA investigators were recommending prosecution under the Clean Water Act, carrying a maximum penalty of 5 years behind bars and $200,000 in fines. Delilah's complexion turned ghostly. On top of that, the IRS had launched a probe into undeclared income from fraudulent HOA deals, and the State Insurance Commission was pursuing felony fraud charges related to damage from illegal construction. Her breakdown was cinematic. Screaming about conspiracies and eco-terrorism, she accused everyone from the sheriff to the EPA of being part of my supposed criminal cabal, while vowing to sue every person in the room. Her tirade, recorded from multiple angles, immortalized her transformation from authoritarian HOA president to unhinged defendant. As she shouted about constitutional rights once she'd trampled for months, her designer suit wilted under the hot lights. The audience erupted into spontaneous clapping, cheering like a liberated people. Children waved "Save Our Creek" signs. Parents live-streamed the meltdown to social media, making our win a viral beacon for other oppressed communities. When Fire Marshal Wilson moved the crowd outside due to overcrowding, it felt more like a block party celebrating the neighborhood bully's fall. The final blow came from Vernon. As his wife shrieked in the background, he took the mic and calmly announced he was divorcing her and cooperating with investigators. "I don't even recognize the person she's become," he said. "Her obsession with destroying this creek has cost us everything. I won't go down with her." That betrayal sent Delilah spiraling. Paramedics had to be called as she suffered what appeared to be a full psychological collapse. The vote to strip Delilah of all HOA duties passed unanimously while she ranted from a stretcher about betrayal and conspiracies, footage that environmental organizations would replay for years as proof that persistence and records can topple even the most entrenched corruption. When she was finally ousted, the silence that followed felt like inhaling clean mountain air after months of choking on fumes. Our community could finally start to mend. New leadership emerged through the most transparent HOA election our neighborhood had ever seen, replacing Delilah's yes men with people who understood that community boards exist to serve, not rule. All legal actions against my creek were dismissed with prejudice, meaning no future HOA could ever weaponize policy against my family's 80-year-old water rights. The $30,000 settlement for harassment felt secondary to the public recognition that Delilah's campaign had been a criminal misuse of power masquerading as neighborhood stewardship. Justice came crashing down on Delilah like a Colorado avalanche. Convictions for environmental crimes, theft, and fraud cemented a legacy of disgrace. The $68,000 in EPA fines and required remediation bankrupted her outright. Their oversized home had to be sold for $140,000 under market due to liens that scared off buyers. She declared bankruptcy within 4 months, the spectacular fall of someone who tried to erase my grandfather's legacy and wound up destroying her own life chasing power she never earned. Vernon's guilt-funded creek restoration project revitalized our waterway beyond even Grandpa Joe's most ambitious dreams. Ecology students from the University of Colorado adopted the site for research on species revival and water quality. Native plantings restored beauty and created corridors for wildlife long absent, like the family of river otters that became local celebrities among visiting children and nature lovers. But the greatest change was personal. In the battle to protect our family's creek, I rediscovered my own passion for environmental advocacy, something I'd set aside during my years in corporate life. My kids, Emma and Jake, became young conservationists able to identify local wildlife and discuss water law like seasoned pros, proud of their father for standing up to power and winning. Weekend creek walks became lessons in ecology, civic duty, and courage in the face of institutional bullying. Donations helped us build the Grandpa Joe Memorial Conservation Center, offering school programs on watershed protection, supporting climate research, and serving as a hub for advocacy groups launching their own campaigns across Colorado. Emma's full scholarship The Colorado State's environmental engineering program continued our family's commitment to water stewardship. 3 years later, our story helped change state laws now requiring environmental reviews before HOAs can target natural features. Documentaries introduced our creek to national audiences, while I began speaking at conferences on how communities can push back against systemic abuse. Our annual Creek Festival attracts thousands offering water testing, salamander counts, and workshops on organizing and advocacy. Local businesses sponsor educational tents while kids decorate the bridge Grandpa Joe built, now a symbol of resistance to the kind of authoritarianism Delilah tried to impose. As an engineer, I've learned that safeguarding our natural legacy requires mastering both environmental law and community dynamics. But more than that, I've learned that regular people can beat the system if they document everything, build alliances, and outlast the tactics meant to break their spirit. Nature is often protected by laws that outrank local boards, but it's up to us to know our rights and fight for them. Developers and dictators will always pick quick power over lasting sustainability. Each morning, as I walk the creek trail with coffee in hand and mountain air in my lungs, hearing water trickle over stones my grandfather once laid, I remember his voice. Some fights are worth it, not for us, but for the ones not yet born. The memorial bridge where Emma and Jake now bring their friends has become a place where families pass on lessons in conservation, courage, and community values. So what's the worst HOA nightmare you faced? Tell us your story in the comments. It might just inspire the next episode of Stories, where everyday neighbors stand up to suburban tyranny and win. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for more real-life victories. Where organized communities prove corruption doesn't stand a chance against people who refuse to back down. Thanks for watching HOA Stories.